Welcome to Life Stories, where sometimes the scariest thing isn't what lurks in the dark, it's what no one believes in the light. Imagine standing in front of your entire class, heart pounding, as you proudly tell them what your father does, only to be laughed at, dismissed, and accused of lying. Not because of your words, but because of your skin. But what if everything you said was true? What if your father wasn't just the man who packed your lunch, but someone who held the nation's security in his hands? And what if the danger he tried to keep away followed him straight into your classroom? This is a story about silence and sacrifice, about being underestimated and unseen until the moment you're forced to prove that truth doesn't need permission. Let's begin. Jalen Brooks knew how to disappear, even while standing in the center of a room. At 10 years old, he'd already mastered the quiet art of survival at Hawthorne Prep, the kind of school where last names mattered more than grades and where children like him were outnumbered and underestimated. Every day, he buttoned the blazer of his uniform, straightened his tie, and tucked away the truth like it was something shameful. That morning, as sunlight glinted off the marble floors of the school's atrium, Jalen sat silently at the back of room 112, watching the clock and dreading the hour ahead, presentation day. Miss Whitmore, poised as always in her cream blouse and polished smile, floated from desk to desk like a queen surveying her court. When her eyes landed on him, Jalen could already feel the weight of judgment pressing down. The assignment was simple: talk about your parents' job. For the other kids, it was a performance, a chance to flaunt power, wealth, lineage. Aidan Clark's dad designed luxury hotels in Dubai. Carter Langston's mother negotiated trade deals in Geneva. And Jalen's father, Caleb Brooks, worked for the Department of Homeland Security. Only no one believed him. He remembered the way the laughter had started the last time he mentioned it in passing. A ripple, then a wave. Someone muttered "janitor," and the label stuck. Miss Whitmore had said nothing then, only adjusted her pearl necklace and moved on. Now his name was first on the roster. Jalen stood, palms damp, voice tight. "My name is Jalen Brooks, and I'm here to talk about my dad's job. He works in." "Hear that?" Carter Langston leaned back in his chair, loud enough for the class to hear. "FBI, CIA, or just the broom closet?" Snickers, eyes darting. And then Miss Whitmore's voice, honeyed but sharp. "Let's let him finish. I'm sure this will be enlightening." Jalen cleared his throat, fists clenched by his sides. "My dad works in threat analysis. He keeps the country safe." Silence, until Tyler raised his hand. "So, like, does he guard doors or clean them?" Laughter again, this time even louder. Jalen's heart pounded. "No, he works in cybersecurity, real operations." Miss Whitmore's lips curled, condescending. "Jalen, imagination is a wonderful thing, but let's focus on facts, not fiction." "He's telling the truth." Aidan suddenly blurted from the back. "I've seen his dad pick him up. He has a badge." Miss Whitmore's smile tightened like a noose. "Aidan, if we interrupt again, there'll be consequences." Jalen's ears rang. He sat down slowly, blinking back a shame that burned deeper than anger. It wasn't just about being called a liar. It was the certainty on her face that people like him couldn't possibly come from anything important. That evening at home, his father was quiet, as he often was. Caleb Brooks didn't speak much about his work, and Jalen had learned not to ask. He sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, scanning encrypted reports on a secure tablet while the news played softly in the background. Jalen finally spoke. "She said I was making it up." Caleb looked up slowly. "Who?" "My teacher. She laughed when I told the class about you." Caleb's jaw flexed. "What exactly did she say?" Jalen repeated the story. Word for word, his father didn't flinch. He simply said, "What day is Parents' Day?" "Next Friday. I'll be there." Jalen stared at him. "But what if something comes up at work again?" Caleb met his son's gaze. "Nothing will." That night, Jalen passed the study and paused. The door was half open. Inside, Caleb was on a secure call. Jalen caught a few words: Hawthorne, compromise, local breach, before the door closed softly. The next morning, their neighborhood was quiet, as always. Jalen stepped out to find a black SUV idling across the street. He looked up at his father, who said only, "Don't worry, just keeping watch." At school, the air shifted. Miss Whitmore's smugness had a new edge. Parents' Day will be a wonderful opportunity, she said to the class, for everyone to see the real stories behind our students. Jalen said nothing. He waited. On Friday, Caleb arrived not in his usual business casual attire, but in a tailored navy suit, the Homeland Security badge clipped to his lapel. His presence shifted the air of room 112 the moment he stepped inside. Miss Whitmore froze mid-sentence. Jalen stepped forward. Miss Whitmore, this is my dad. Caleb extended a hand. Ma'am, Caleb Brooks, Threat Assessment Division, Homeland Security. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then someone whispered, Wait, seriously? Before Miss Whitmore could respond, the classroom door opened again. A man in a dark suit stepped inside, his voice low but urgent. Sir, it started. Unauthorized access attempt just hit the school's network. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Where? Internal. Student servers. Possible infiltration. Caleb turned back to Miss Whitmore. You'll have to excuse me. There's something I need to take care of. As he left the room, no one laughed. No one smirked. Jalen sat down slowly, his heart pounding. Not with shame, but something else. Something that felt like vindication. What does it cost a child to be doubted by the very people meant to protect and believe in him? And what happens when a father's silence hides not shame, but state secrets? Because what began as humiliation is about to unravel into a threat far beyond one boy's reputation. And Caleb Brooks didn't come to Hawthorne Prep for show and tell. He came to stop a war. Caleb didn't pause when he stepped into the hallway. His hand was already at his earpiece, his voice low and controlled. Confirm breach origin. The agent walking beside him matched his pace, face tight. It's internal, sir. Whoever accessed the school system knew what they were looking for. Firewall signatures matched the Cora protocol. Caleb's footsteps faltered just slightly. Cora wasn't just any cyber espionage group. They were ghosts with state sponsors, the kind of threat that left no fingerprints, only wreckage. They reached the school's secure server room near the administrative wing. Inside, the IT technician was pale, staring at a screen filled with code that scrolled too fast for any of the staff to follow. Caleb stepped forward and keyed into a command terminal. Timestamp shows entry at 9:13 a.m. That's 12 minutes after I arrived on campus. His voice dropped. This isn't random. They waited for me to be here. Ramirez's voice crackled over the comm. We're triangulating signal routes. But Caleb, there's more. Someone accessed your son's file directly. His breath stilled. Jalen? Yes, she confirmed. His school profile, home address, family network access points. They pulled it all, then disappeared. He stared at the screen. In all the years he had worked in threat mitigation, Caleb had made one rule. Keep home separate from field. Never let them cross. But now, sitting on this quiet server in a private school surrounded by trophy cases and yearbook photos, was the wreckage of that boundary. Back in room 112, Jalen sat stiffly, watching the classroom door with a sense he couldn't name, somewhere between dread and hope. Aiden leaned over. Is your dad okay? Jalen nodded, though he wasn't sure. He just had to deal with something. Miss Whitmore hadn't said a word since Caleb left. She kept glancing toward the hallway, her usually confident posture withering beneath the weight of something she couldn't explain. It wasn't long before the PA system crackled. Attention all students and faculty, we are initiating a precautionary lockdown. Please remain in your current classrooms with the doors closed until further notice. This is not a drill. Gasps rippled through the room. Parents shifted uncomfortably. Miss Whitmore's hands trembled as she turned the lock on the door. Stay calm, she said, her voice cracking. It's just a drill. Jalen knew better. 15 minutes later, the classroom door opened again. Caleb stood there, flanked by two federal agents, eyes scanning the room until they landed on his son. Jalen, come here. Jalen rose instantly, weaving through the crowd. Aiden too, Caleb added. You're both with me now. What's happening? Jalen asked as they stepped into the hall. Someone used the school to get to us, Caleb answered, eyes sharp. They knew I'd be here, and they knew you would too. The hallways had changed. What once felt like the hushed quiet of a prep school now hummed with tension. More agents lined the walls, some in plain clothes, others with weapons just visible beneath their jackets. Outside, Jalen glimpsed the courtyard, now filled with black SUVs and unmarked vans. Hawthorne Prep had become a command center. They reached the principal's office, converted now into a secure comms room. Screens lit up with maps, code, security footage. Jalen stared as one monitor replayed hallway footage from earlier that morning. A maintenance worker moving through the West Wing. "That's not one of ours," an agent said. "We've confirmed he doesn't exist in any staff records." "Where was he headed?" Caleb asked. "The East Wing, near the server room." Then he doubled back toward the classrooms. A silence settled. Jalen's stomach twisted. He was looking for someone. "Yes," Caleb said quietly. "He was looking for you." There was a knock. Ramirez entered, her face unusually grim. "Caleb, we found something." She handed him a school-issued tablet, Jalen's. He got this alert 10 minutes before the breach. She pressed play on the screen. A strange, glitching message appeared. A string of encrypted characters, then a brief flash of an image. Barely perceptible, but unmistakable to someone who knew what to look for. It was a photograph. Caleb, in military fatigues, standing in a desert years ago. Next to him, a man with a blurred face, later identified as Viktor Resnick, a former Russian asset Caleb had buried during an operation codenamed Blackfish. Except the man hadn't stayed buried. Jalen watched as his father's posture changed. He wasn't just an agent now. He was a man being hunted. "They're not just coming for intel," Caleb said slowly. "They're coming for leverage." "What kind of leverage?" Jalen asked. Caleb looked directly at his son. "You." The realization settled like ice in Jalen's chest. His school, once a fortress of routines, grades, and subtle slights, had become a battleground. His classmates didn't know it yet, but they had been sitting next to bait, him. Outside, the first sirens began to wail in the distance, city police arriving to reinforce the perimeter. But Caleb wasn't reassured. Resnick didn't send messages. He sent warnings. Caleb turned to Ramirez. "We need to extract Jalen, now, quietly." Ramirez hesitated. "You think they'll come here, in broad daylight?" "They already have," Caleb said. "We just didn't notice until now." He placed a hand on Jalen's shoulder. "From this moment on, you stay within 5 feet of me, no exceptions." And for the first time, Jalen asked the question he had been afraid of all morning. "Dad, are we in danger because of your job, or because of something you didn't finish?" Caleb didn't answer. "Not right away. What would you do if the secrets meant to protect your family became the very thing that put them in the crosshairs?" As the enemy moves closer and the walls of Hawthorne Prep begin to blur with the battlefield, Caleb knows this isn't just about cyber attacks or stolen files. It's personal. And someone is about to make a move. They were 5 minutes from the perimeter when it happened. Caleb Brooks, driving with one hand on the wheel and the other hovering near his concealed sidearm, kept his voice steady even though his heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. "Jalen, if I say duck, you duck. No questions." Jalen, silent in the back seat, nodded once. He didn't ask where they were going. He didn't ask why the SUV behind them hadn't made a turn in 3 blocks. His father had taught him to recognize patterns. Today, he had started to recognize threats. The moment came too fast. An unmarked van barreled through a red light from the left, aiming not to collide, but to intercept. Caleb swerved. Tires screeched. Jalen's body lurched sideways as the SUV slammed into a row of trash bins and kept moving. But Caleb wasn't heading home anymore. He had changed course the moment they left the school. They were headed to a fallback site, one of the few safe houses his team had designated months ago, just in case the core threat breached protocol. "They know we're moving," Ramirez's voice echoed through Caleb's comm. "They've mobilized local assets. Get to the drop point. We'll meet you there." "We won't make it if they're tracking the car," Caleb replied, initiating blackout. With one flick of a switch beneath the dash, the vehicle's GPS, Wi-Fi, and even brake sensors disconnected. The car went dark. Jalen, breathing fast but controlled, spoke for the first time since they left Hawthorne. "They were at my school. They watched me every day, and I didn't even see them." Caleb looked at him through the mirror. "Neither did I." They reached the safe house, a modest bungalow hidden between rows of decaying homes in southeast DC, the kind of place that looked abandoned to the untrained eye. Inside, reinforced steel walls, backup generators, and layers of security tech whispered that nothing here was ordinary. Caleb swept the rooms first, weapon drawn. Only once he confirmed they were alone did he lock the door behind them and face his son. "Jalen," he said carefully, "you're not just my son anymore. You're a mark on someone's list, and I need you to understand what that means." Jalen sat on the edge of a worn leather couch, his knees pulled to his chest. "Why me?" he asked. "Because I bragged about you at school?" "No," Caleb said, crouching to his level. "Because of who I am. Because of what I did years ago on a mission called Blackfish. There was a man, Resnick. I led the team that dismantled his network. He vanished, but we always suspected he survived. He's here now, and he wants revenge." The silence that followed felt too big for the room. "I shouldn't have told the class," Jalen whispered. "I should have kept my mouth shut." "No," Caleb said firmly. "You should never feel ashamed of the truth, not even when the world punishes you for it." He reached into a side drawer and pulled out a small metal box. Inside lay a tactical wristband modified with GPS, panic alert, and signal scrambler. "Put this on. No matter what happens, I'll find you." Before Jalen could respond, the lights flickered, then went out. "Generator's been cut," Caleb muttered, standing instantly. "Stay here." Outside, the faint sound of footsteps on gravel. Calculated. Close. Caleb reached for the secondary comm, only to hear static. He grabbed his weapon, moved to the side window, and peeled back the edge of the blackout curtain. Nothing. Then, movement. A figure in gray. Masked. Silent. But what Caleb didn't see was the second figure coming from the rear entrance. The breach was quick. Explosives weren't needed, just timing. The back door burst open, and in an instant, the living room was filled with the sharp shout of commands in a language Jalen didn't understand. A hand seized his arm. He shouted for his father, but Caleb was already in the hallway, already firing. The room exploded into chaos. Jalen didn't remember how he got to the floor, only the weight of someone falling beside him, the deafening sound of gunfire, and then his father's voice. "I've got you." Then the sound of a second gun, not Caleb's. The man in gray aimed not at Jalen, but at Caleb. Jalen screamed. The shot rang out. But it wasn't Caleb who fell. Behind the attacker, Ramirez stood, weapon still raised. "Target down," she said into her comm. "Brooks is secure." But it was too late, not for Caleb, for something else. The look on Jalen's face, it wasn't fear. It wasn't shock. It was something colder, something that Caleb hadn't seen in his son before that night, something broken. They got out. The safe house was compromised, but they were extracted before a second wave could arrive. In the following days, arrests were made, servers confiscated, and the carousel Resnick built was dismantled. Again. This time, permanently. But victory didn't taste like it should have. Jalen returned to Hawthorne Prep 2 weeks later. The school now had security systems that rivaled federal buildings. Miss Whitmore no longer avoided his gaze. She asked him to speak to the class about what he'd learned. He declined. He stopped sitting at the back of the classroom. Now he sat in the middle, not quite hiding, not quite seen. Caleb resumed his duties. The president himself sent a letter of commendation. The agency offered him a promotion. He declined. At home, dinner was quieter. Jalen asked fewer questions. He rarely brought up school. And once in the middle of the night, Caleb found his son awake in the hallway, staring at the front door, holding the small tactical wristband he had given him. "Can I sleep in your room?" he had asked. Caleb didn't speak, just opened the door. A month passed, then 2. Jalen's spring showcase arrived, and to Caleb's surprise, he wanted to participate. His project was titled The Cost of Assumptions. On the night of the showcase, Jalen stood in front of a trifold board, lined with clippings, statistics, and one simple sentence printed in bold across the center. "Sometimes what you don't believe is the most dangerous truth of all." No one laughed. Afterward, Caleb and Jalen walked to the car in silence. Before getting in, Jalen asked, "Is it over?" Caleb looked at him, then past him, to the empty school, to the black sky, to the ghosts that would never fully sleep. "No," he said quietly, "but you're ready now." Jalen nodded, as if that answer, though incomplete, was enough. They drove home. Behind them, No cars followed. Not tonight. How did this story make you feel? Were you moved by the journey of Jalen and his father? If you love this story, comment 100 below to let us know. We'd love to hear where you're watching from. What country are you in? If this story resonated with you, share it with a friend. Thank you for watching Life Stories.